But I want to take you back to something that happened to me about 12, 14 years ago. It's the first or second time that I had been to Cuba. The Methodist Church, we have this relationship with the Methodist Church in Cuba where we foster these sister church relationships. And so here, this church, we have a sister church in Calnao. It's outside of Cienfuegos on the southern end or the southern shore of the central part of the island. But I was at another church in St. Petersburg before I came to this church years and years ago, and I went down on an exploratory trip to establish this relationship with the church. Then I came back, and we put together a team, and our first team that went down there included a lot of people. One of the guys was a friend of mine named Carl Slogenhoff. Carl is a guy about my dad's age and about my son's maturity level because we prank each other, we joke all the time, and we laugh quite a bit with each other. But one of the things we didn't laugh about until it was well over, it was leaving Cuba. We had to come through the airport, and when you go to the security checkpoint, you're looking at a bank of desks with an opaque wall behind them all. It's almost like you walk up to it and you go into this little dark shadow and you talk to somebody and like they're going to pull you back out this way. But then the door opens and you walk through to the other side. And so all of the team went through, they got checked through, and it was just me and Carl left. And I said, Carl, why don't you go to that one and I'll go to this one, meeting on the other side. So my line went faster. I went up there, they approved me, I went on through, and Carl was back on the other side. I couldn't see him, he couldn't see me. The rest of the team was like, hey, the plane is getting ready to leave. I was like, tell him we got one more coming. And so 1 minute turned into 5 minutes. 5 minutes turned into 10 minutes, still no Carl. And so I said, guys, we got to pray. We can't leave him here. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do about this, but we're not leaving without Carl. And 10 minutes turned into 15 minutes. And we were praying, and finally the door opened, and he came out. And I said, come on, we got to go. And we ran to the plane and got on, and we were all good. I said, Carl, what happened back there? Well, Carl is as bald as an eagle. He's got a cue ball head, looks great. He's got a goatee here. But in his passport picture, he had a full head of hair. And they said, this is not you. This is no. And he was trying, he didn't speak Spanish, they didn't speak English. And so I said, I just sent this to him. He lives up in Pennsylvania right now. I said, Carl, can I share your story Sunday? I said, do you remember when we went to Cuba and you got stuck there? Dude, do I remember it? It was the most frightening event in my life. To be in a situation where you can't communicate with those around you. I couldn't speak their language, they couldn't speak mine, and to make it more frustrating and scary, they didn't care. They just knew the middle-aged gringo trying to get out of their country didn't have a valid ID, and I think they were already trying to decide where the closest Cuban prison was. And to make it even more scary, the plane I was to be on was just about ready to leave. Through some pantomiming on my part, and as you all told me later, some intense praying on yours, they let me go. He says, through the work of the Holy Spirit and the realization on the part of the Cuban officials that no one would make up something as bizarre as my story, they let me go. And then he closes with this line. You can bet that I made plans to get an updated passport even as I was changing my drawers on the board of the plane. We can laugh now, but he was not laughing. Trying to explain, I am who I say I am. And how frustrating. And so let me ask you, how do you define yourself? How do you prove you are who you say you are? Jesus spent a lot of time shaping the outlook of a group of guys, disciples that would start his church. And 2,000 years later, we're in that wake. But when he spent time with them, he talked to them quite a bit about their identity. And he did not say, you will be known by what you say you believe. It will not be your doctrinal distinctives or your theology that makes you known. You will not be known by the things that you hope someday to do in my name. He said you will be known by loving people, by the way you love people. It's in John 13:35. That's up on the screen here. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other. And I'm tempted to think that there's more to it, but there's not. Jesus said it's your love. And the early church in the book of Acts, they looked at them, the city and the secular officials, they just scratched their head and said, but how they love each other. Look how they love. Well, it's easy to love those who are kind. It's easy to love those who are humble, those who are lovely, those who are just like you or just like me. And I think that we can spend our time in life, most of our lives, with people who are like us. And they tell us, hey, you are so loving because you and I are loving the people that are easy to love. But have you ever thought that we could be avoiding the people we don't understand and the ones who live different than we are when we spend all of our time with people who are like us? Here's why. Some of them creep us out. Who creeps you out? Okay, don't throw their names out there. Do not say their name. Especially if he's your husband and he's sitting right next to you. Don't say it, all right? But who is it, honestly, that you say, do I have to love that kind of a person? That's just scary. Bob Goff wrote a book I'm going to share in just a moment. He said, sadly, I've spent my whole life avoiding the people Jesus spent his whole life engaging. Ouch. Wow. God's idea isn't that we would just give and receive love, but that we would become love. People who are becoming love see the beauty in other people, even when their off-putting behavior makes for a weird mask that everybody sees through. But we who are becoming love, we see the beauty there. Jesus summed it up to his disciples by saying, guys, I want you to love everybody, always. It's that simple. Not that easy, but that's simple to understand. Bob Goff wrote a book called Everybody, Always. This is the same guy who wrote a book called Love Does, all right? He's a storyteller. And if you get this book, you can order it on Amazon, go to Hobby Lobby, somewhere here in town, they sell this thing. It's going to be a great book for us to read. I'm going to talk about how we can be in life groups together, small groups studying this over the next 5 weeks as we unpack what does it mean to love everybody always. Because that's what Jesus' message was to each of us. And so this morning, I'm going to set it up. I'm going to give us a primer, if you will, from chapter 1 that sets the stage for the rest of our time together, the next 5 weeks, as we really take a look at ourselves and how well am I doing loving everybody, not just the ones who are like me or the ones that I understand, but those who live differently than I do. Those who live by a different standard than I do, and I don't agree with that, okay? How do I live with people that I would rather go through life having to avoid? And how do I start with the people who creep me out? Now, before we get started, let me just say this. Are there unsafe people out there? Are there toxic folks that to be in a relationship, in a trusting relationship with is just not wise? Of course. Absolutely. And God has given each of us a measure of judgment or discernment to understand. But there's a difference between exercising judgment and living in judgment, isn't there? And what God wants us to do is to major on the first. Exercise judgment and minor on the second. Go light on judging other people. In fact, don't judge other people. To love difficult people requires tackling fear. And I've got fear. I don't want to be around that person or those kinds of people, and you've got them too. But we have to tackle our own fears. We put up barriers, and barriers are meant to protect. I don't want my life or my ordering of my life to be upset, or the way I've understood my whole outlook on life to be. And so if I start talking with people who are very different, they live very differently, and they see the world differently, that might mess things up. And so I protect and I put up barriers. And I can do that with big words and with opinions and convictions, And there's nothing wrong with protecting ourselves, okay? Only Jesus didn't do it that way. Jesus spent his last meal with a guy that he knew. In fact, he called him out as being the one who would betray him. And Jesus died on a cross without whispering a word that, hey, I'm innocent here. I didn't do it. Jesus willingly gave himself to those who were not safe. We don't need to mask our insecurities with our opinions. We need to grow love in our hearts and cultivate it in the world that God has plopped us down in. And we grow where we are planted in this generation, in this society, with its challenges. Those who are becoming love don't throw people off roofs. They lower people through roofs to the Jesus who can heal and forgive. On Wednesday night, we had a worship night here, and some of you were a part of that. I mentioned there, and I'll mention again today, that our daughter Gracie, Laura and I, we have 5 daughters and 1 son, and our third daughter, Gracie, has decided to go over to Kenya for 3 months. And while she's over there, she's exploring, is God calling me to missions? I seem to be drawn to missions and drawn to children. So she's working with an orphanage over there. But admittedly, she's been there 2 weeks. It's been very difficult for her to acclimate. Everything is different. There's nothing familiar to fall back on, so to speak. So she's had a very difficult time. And I understood this. Laura told me that in her conversations with Gracie was saying, I just feel like I'm serving God. I'm following Him to do good because this is a good thing. It's a Christian mission. And I thought that I would hear God's voice. And I just don't hear Him. I'm praying, but He's not talking back. Have you ever felt that way? And so on Wednesday, we have WhatsApp. It's a free texting. You can international text or call or video. And so we're conversing back and forth. And I said to Grace, how's it going? And she goes, actually going better than it has been. And I said, it sounds like you've turned a corner. And she goes, actually, I hope I do. I hope I have turned a corner. And then she wrote these words down. He's been helping me more with patience and peace in knowing that He is working on something amazing, and part of the beauty in it is that it hasn't come right away. That's maturity. And I'm thinking, that's my daughter? Where does she get that? Clearly from Laura. That's beautiful. I called her last night and said, can I quote that? Sure, that's fine. Maybe you're struggling too. Maybe somebody in this room or somebody watching online is struggling to hear. I thought that I would hear God's voice, and it's not panning out the way that I expected it would. And so sometimes you and I, we hear people, they're trying to evangelize, they're trying to break into a spiritual conversation, so they ask this question. Hey, have you ever met Jesus? Has anybody ever asked you that question? Do you know Jesus? Have you met Jesus? And I know what they're getting at, but what we can really say is, no, I've never met Him. Very few people on planet Earth ever met the guy. We know 12 of them did, and then a mom and a dad and some brothers and sisters. And a few people saw Him from a distance when He lived among us, but most of us have never met Jesus. We've never seen the face of our Savior, right? Bob Goff says, for a long time, I saw Him from a distance and thought I had met Him. And it still happens every time I avoid people God made in His image, just because I don't understand them. Every time I avoid somebody, I miss meeting Jesus. I've come to realize that if I really want to meet Jesus, then I have to get a lot closer to the people He created. All of them. Not just the ones that I choose. Not just some of them. In Matthew 25, you know this passage. I'm not going to unpack this passage, but let me just refer to it. Jesus says, when the Son of Man, His favorite self-designation, taking an appellation from the book of Daniel that talked about one like a son of man and a son of the gods. He looked like he was divine and human. When the Son of Man comes with the angels in His glory, He will separate each person one by one as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. He'll put the sheep on His right, the goats on His left, and He'll say to those on His right, welcome to the kingdom that's been created from the foundation of the earth for you. God saw this, saw you, and He created because I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, a refugee or an asylum seeker, and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison, you did not forget me. Come into the kingdom that's been created for you. And all of those on His right will look at each other and say, when, Lord? When did we see you hungry and feed you and thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we take you in as a stranger and clothe you when you were naked? When did we visit you when you were sick and in prison? And then He said, when you did it to the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Throw the scripture up there, Matthew 25, I forget the exact verse here, but verse 40, from the Message translation. Whenever you did one of these things to someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me. And I love the beauty of that picture that we meet God in the people, especially those who need love most. That's when we see the face of God. I asked Gracie, I said, what's that quote that Mother Teresa has that you have in your room somewhere? And I wasn't at home. I couldn't go into her room to figure it out. I said, what's that quote Mother Teresa? Something about the face of God. And she came back on WhatsApp and she goes, Dad, that wasn't Mother Teresa. That was Victor Hugo in Les Mis. All right? Well, what's the quote? And the quote is, to love another person is to see the face of God. I love that. But I did search all the quotes of Mother Teresa trying to get that before I talked to Gracie, because I thought it was Mother Teresa. But I did find this one. She spoke this. Mother Teresa says, "What is my thought? I see Jesus in every human being. I say to myself, this is hungry Jesus. I must feed him. This is sick Jesus. This one has leprosy or gangrene. I must wash him and tend to him. I serve because I love Jesus." And how beautiful. We learn about Jesus, of course, in the Scriptures and from sermons like this or Bible studies and life groups that we attend. We do learn more about Jesus. But we also learn about Jesus and about who God is in the people he has created in his image. And that's everybody, always. He wants us to meet him by loving those who are difficult to get along with, those who it's inconvenient for us to go out of our way to tend to them. I think his plan all along has been for us to meet the people he made and feel like we have just met Jesus, especially the poor and the disenfranchised and the invisible, and also those who creep us out. We just don't understand that person and why they live like they do. And in this sense, I've met God every day of my life, and so have you. Let's not avoid him by avoiding them. Jesus told his friends if they want to be like him, they need to love their neighbors, and he defined these as those difficult for us to love. Another story, Luke chapter 10. There are certain Bible chapters you should know that's where the story is. The story of the prodigal son is in Luke 15, and that should be just a quick way to get there. But Luke 10 is the story of the Good Samaritan. And if you remember this story, it's set in the context of a question. An expert in the law that day, a high lifted up person, everybody respected this person because they knew the Scriptures, tested Jesus one day with a question. And he asks him, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life, to live, to fully live the way God has intended for us to live?" And Jesus says, "Well, you know the Scriptures. What do the Scriptures say?" And so he quoted something that's come down to us as known as the Great Commandment. Well, he says, the Bible says, I am to love the Lord my God. I think it's up here. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And he tacks on another scripture, Luke 19:18, and love your neighbor. I'm sorry, it's Numbers 19:18. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So he knew the right answer, and he throws it out there. And Jesus says, very well. You've answered wisely. Do this and you will live. You will find life. Love God, love your neighbor. But then Luke, who's telling the story in Luke chapter 10, he writes this phrase. He says, but the man wishing to justify himself pressed Jesus and said, and who is my neighbor? If he would have left that out, it would have been enough for us to say, he's just asking a clarifying question. I want to love God with all my heart, soul, strength, and mind. I want to love my neighbor as myself. Can you help me know how to do that to the full? And so tell me what is meant by love your neighbor as yourself. But instead, Luke shows us his hand. The man wished to justify himself because clearly he wasn't loving everybody always. And so he was really asking, how far do we have to go with this love thing? I mean, can I only love to this point and keep God happy? And what a mean-hearted love, you know? That's a stingy way of looking at life. And so Jesus tells a story. The story goes, the man was leaving Jerusalem and going down to Jericho, and he fell among robbers. They beat him, they stripped him, they took his money, they left him for dead, went on. But not to fear, here comes Pastor Rick. So Rick comes down the highway entrance, the exit, and he stops at the red light, and he looks over, and he sees this guy bloodied and beaten and bruised and, you know, not clad well. And he looks at the light, and he looks at this guy, and he's like, oh, I got an appointment with somebody in my church, and that's important. You wouldn't want me to be late for that. So when the light turned green, Pastor Rick went right on through and went on his way. But that's okay. A member of Grace at Fort Clarke shows up next and pulls up to that same light, looks over, sees the guy all beaten and bloody and bruised, and he's not clothed very well. And he looks at the light, and the light turns green. And this is an awkward moment. I mean, I can't stop. I got people behind me here. And so he goes on through as well. And then Jesus says in his story, a Samaritan comes along. Now, before I go any further, the Samaritan means nothing to you and to me, okay? But if this were a first century Jewish audience and Jesus said, and then a Samaritan came along, you would hear a groan in the crowd. Ugh. Why would you bring that into our story? And so I want to say time out. Before I finish the story, I want you to think about the people that make you groan. It may be an individual, somebody who hurt you or somebody that you would wish that you could do the rest of your life avoiding. You don't need that person in your life. You would be happy as a clam if they were taken out. They moved to Hawaii, okay? They're never going to do life with you. Or maybe it's a class of people, socioeconomically. You've pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. You're on your way up, and those people, they're the poor. It's a class that are just, yeah. Or maybe it's the opposite. You don't have a lot of money, and the rich are the ones that you'd rather do without. Religiously, you're a Christian. Maybe it's Muslim. Maybe it's a Hindu. Maybe it's an atheist. Okay? Or in the church, if you're a Christian, there are certain groups that have changed or left the teachings of the historic faith, and they're called Christian cults, not in a disparaging way, but just they've left the orthodox teaching that Jesus is who he says he is, the Son of God, Son of Man, and he's come to save us. And so the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they have a different take on Jesus. The Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a different take. And so you are like, that's the group that I don't want as a part of this story. And Jesus says a Samaritan drove up, and when he looked over and saw the guy beat up, something happened in his heart. And he got out of his car, didn't care about the light and the people behind him and his next appointment. He went over and he picked the guy up, and he put him in his own vehicle. And he drove him to Shands down on Archer. And it says that he spent the night, as he was in the ER, to make sure he got a room. He got into his room. He said, I got to go. I've got a meeting. I'll be back 2 days from now. I want to check on him to see how he's doing. Jesus finished the story of the Good Samaritan, and then he asked this question of the lawyer who justified himself by saying, and who is my neighbor? Jesus said, now which one of these three? Pastor Rick, or the partner in ministry at Grace at Fort Clarke, or the fill in the blank with your own group that makes you moan? Which one was the neighbor? And the man said, I suppose the one who showed mercy to the man who was beat up. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. That's your answer that you're looking for. Whether you're trying to test me or you're truly seeking to clarify, how do I love God with all my heart? And how do I love my neighbors myself? Find the one that makes you moan and groan and you wish you can avoid them the rest of your life. And be merciful to them. Get to know them. Do they need love? You provide it. That's a powerful story. And Bob Goff says Jesus told his friends if they wanted to be like him, they needed to love their neighbors and they needed to love difficult people. He said, this sounds so familiar that I'm tempted to just agree with Jesus and move on. But Jesus doesn't want us merely to agree with him. In fact, I can't think of a single time he gathered his friends around him and said, guys, I just want you to agree with me. He wants us to do what he said. The point is, Jesus says, I don't want you to agree with me. I want you to do what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is to love your enemies, not just your neighbors, not just the folks like you. Love the people that make you moan and groan. Jesus says to love your enemies. And you and I, we look and we say, honestly, Pastor, I don't think I have any enemies. I mean, like North Korea, they're not mad with me. China, I'm good. Nothing personal there at all. But I think Jesus had something else in mind when he used the word enemies. Jesus is talking about people who live life differently than I agree with. People who hurt me, and I'm mad because that was hurtful, legitimately so. People who are flat wrong about certain things, okay? By everybody's estimation, we all know it, okay? The people that get under my skin. And those can be people in my life. They could be family members in a season or in a day. It could be an argument that I'm having, and that person's making me an enemy, and I'm feeling like an enemy. And you and I can be that person. Ever think you are one of those people? An enemy, well, let's look at an enemy to God. And in relation to God, we are all enemies of God. But here's the good news. In Romans chapter 5, verses 7 and 8, we read these verses here. I'm going to have to read it here. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. You might find it. It's rare. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He's sovereign, and we want to exert our own sovereignty. We want to have our own will, and we don't really care for anybody else to tell us how to live life. We're enemies. Or he's holy, he's pure, and, well, you don't have to convince me that I'm not holy. I'm impure. I've lost my innocence and traded in the best parts of me at times in my life. We're enemies. We're not on the same team. And yet God demonstrates love. He loves everybody always, to the point of dying for me. Here's the thing. God, who is love, has every right to hate his enemies, to walk away, to leave them to their own devices. But God, who is love, does not pout. He does not withhold his love like you and I do when people hurt our feelings, when people walk away from us, when those ignore us and they hate us. Instead, he pursues you. He pursues me, and that's good news. I need to hear that. You need to hear that. And you know what? Everybody needs to hear that. Always. Somebody is here today that might feel like you wish this were true for you. But pastor, truth be told, I would not say this to anybody else, but as a pastor, and you have to keep this confidential, I would disclose to you or confess to you, there's something that I did, there are things that I have become that God, he only can be upset with me. And what you're saying is he has every right. And I agree with you there. That's every one of us. But let me remind you, he demonstrates his love for us while you're his enemy. Put up there verse 10, Romans, for if while we were God's enemies, he reconciled us to himself through the death of Jesus, how much more, having now been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? He brought him back from the grave. And the point is that Jesus doesn't call us to do what he himself hasn't already done. God loves his enemies. He calls you and me to do the same. It's been in my marriage where I have learned the most about this guy right here. I thought I knew everything. Not really. I mean, I wasn't that arrogant that I know everything. I thought I knew me pretty well when I got married. And then I keep hearing this phrase along the way that my wife will say to somebody else in my hearing, he's still in husband school. You know what I'm talking about? And then I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess that was not the smartest thing for me to do or to say. One of the things that I've learned is, Rick, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Okay? Because some of us stand up for what's right and we don't care, and then we lose it all. And we're like, what just happened there? Bob Goff says, as a lawyer, I win arguments for a living. But something has changed within me. I want to be Jesus. I've concluded we can be correct and not right. Know what I mean? I do this most often when I have the right words and the wrong heart. Sadly, whenever I make my opinions more important than the difficult people God made, I turn the wine back into water. I'm trying to resist the bait that darkness offers me every day to trade kindness for rightness. These are not mutually exclusive ideas, of course, but there's a big difference between being kind and being right. Pick the most controversial social issue of the day. You got one in mind? And you'll find passionate voices on all sides. The sad fact is many of us have lost our way trying to help others find theirs. Isn't that true? Arguments won't change people. Simply giving away kindness won't change people either. Only Jesus has the power to change people. And it will be harder for them to see Jesus if their view of him is blocked by our big opinions. That's wisdom. So getting back to our initial question, I want to ask you, how do you prove who you are? Some people think it'll be by the people, I'll be known by the people I hang out with, or by the groups or the major ideas that I subscribe to, my faith tradition. That's how I'll be known. But let me say this. While we may be known for our opinions, we'll be remembered for our love. Did he love? Did she love? Even though I disagreed with a lot, they loved me. They loved well. We really find our identities by engaging the people we've been avoiding. And again, we say around here, this is a church that's learning to love God, love others, and change the world. And Jesus put it, love Him, love your neighbor, love your enemy. We love God. That's why we're here. That's why we get involved in group studies and get out there and try to do things in His name. We love our neighbors, the ones we know, but do we love our enemies? Those we don't understand, or those that we simply can't stand? Do we love them? Do we have to love them? Well, don't forget this. Jesus came to make God's enemies into God's friends. That's the end game that He's after for all of us. We have that same shot. And how did He do it? By shaming you? When you were His enemy, did He point that bony finger of His lecture, in your face and say, you've got to do this? And did that effectively bring you in? Or did He just love you and it melted your heart? Let's go and do the same. He lets the power of love do all the talking for Him. We have the same shot in other people's lives every day. So I'm asking myself, how are you doing at that, Rick? And I'm looking out here and I'm seeing stories and hearing stories, and I love it. Where's Kathy Bolton? She's here somewhere this morning. Kathy, where's Kathy? Just wait, right here. Okay. Kathy, right here. And she tells the story that it's my white hair that means a lot, okay? Yesterday, she said, hey, pray for me. I just invited a Saudi Arabian couple that I met at Home Depot over to my house today. You don't even know these people. She says she's at Home Depot or Walmart, and usually they've got children, and she's like, oh, are you from Saudi Arabia? Are you from Iran? Are you from? And she finds out that they're not from here originally. They come to the school here or whatever. And then she asks this question, have you ever been in an American home? And 8 out of 10 times people will say no, because people who come to study here from another land, 8 out of 10 of them have never been invited into an American home. Did you know that? And so Kathy says, again, Rick, it's my white hair. Okay, she says, they know that I'm safe or what have you. And so she invited the Saudi couple yesterday. So at 3 o'clock, they came over to your house. And so I said a prayer for her as she asked. And then afterwards, I texted her and I said, how did it go? And she said, well, it went better than I expected. The wife doesn't know English that well. The husband was doing a lot of translating for us. And the wife said, would you teach me English? So there's an open door of invitation that the Saudi asked of Kathy, can I spend time with you? And Kathy says, sure, we can do it here. We can do it at your apartment. Sure, would you come to my apartment? So she's going to go, and she's going to spend time over the next season just telling her about English and showing the love of Jesus. It's so beautiful. Loving each other is what we were meant to do and how we were made to roll. It's not where we start when we begin following Jesus necessarily, but it's the beautiful path that we travel the rest of our lives. Will it be messy and ambiguous and uncomfortable when we love people the way Jesus said to love them? You bet it will. Will we be misunderstood? Constantly. But extravagant love often means coloring outside the lines and going beyond the norms. Loving the neighbors we don't understand takes work and humility and patience and guts. It means leaving the security of our easy relationships to engage in some tremendously awkward ones. So I challenge you, church, over the next 5 weeks, starting this week, here's your challenge. The first easy challenge, start with an easy one that everybody can do, and it's this card that you were handed when you came in. It's a memory verse. Commit this verse to memory. And every week we'll have a new verse, and in 5 weeks we may, memorize 3 to 5 verses, and we'll just do it together, okay? This one, 1 John 4:7, it's out of the New International Version. Would you read this out loud with me? You didn't get this? Oh, okay, you're going to get it on your way out, all right? Make sure of it, Rachel. It's real simple. It says, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God, all right? One of you get that one right there. John Muller, I'm going to ask you to stand up here next week and recite that from memory, okay? Yeah, of course. How convenient. Here's the real challenge, okay? That's easy. Here's the hard one. Find somebody that you disagree with. They're already in your world. Somebody that you really can't stand. Somebody that you don't like so much. And I want you to reach out and build a bridge to them this week. It might just be getting together for coffee. It might be just asking them, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, and let them share about themselves. But what if every person in this room, everybody watching on Facebook Live or on our website would say, I'll take you up on that challenge. This week, I'll get out of my comfort zone and I'll chase down someone. They may be undeserving. They may never have earned it. Isn't that what we just read? That he chases us down. He leaves the 99. What does that mean? The 99 sheep that need no protection. He goes after the one who's lost. What if you and I would be the bridge builders to that? And here's the third challenge. Memorize Scripture. Go after somebody you disagree with. And just get to know them. Just love them. And thirdly, would you do this with some other person or another group of people? Over the next 5 weeks, we've put together these life groups. Some of them are existing. There's like 30 or so life groups or Sunday school classes. And if you can't plug into one of those, they're not meeting at a time that works for you, would you at least just come to us and say, hey, I'd like to do this, but I need a group, or I'd be willing to start one with me and 2 other people? Let's do this with others. Maybe you should do it with your family. There are videos that we're going to show. Bob Goff's going to share, and he's just funny. He's just real. And he's going to show us how to love others, to love everybody, love always. But that's the challenge that I'm going to leave with all of us. And when we come back next week, I want to hear some stories. I already heard some from the 8 o'clock service this morning of how people are already doing this. So let's get back together and let's swap some stories of, hey, here's what I did. And was it messy? Yeah. And did I fall flat on my face? Yes. But at least I was moving forward. That's what we're called to do, to love everybody always. I'm going to say a prayer, and I'm going to invite the team to come up and to lead us. And I apologize. Our air apparently is not working so well. We're going to look into that. But when football season comes, it gets cool around here, doesn't it? In like November. Let's pray together. God, thank you so much for leaving the 99 to find me. And when I was your enemy, you demonstrated your love by dying for me. God, thank you so much that that's all of our stories, that every one of us can say we were an enemy of God and we're still not deserving and we can't earn this thing, but you just love us. We want to go do the same thing. We don't want to agree with you that that's the thing we should do. God, we want to do it. And so would you give us your Holy Spirit to empower us, especially the introverts in the room, those who don't feel like that they could strike up a conversation with a stranger or go outside of their comfort zones. Would you give us the Holy Spirit encounter in the right moment to say something that just starts to build that bridge? And we will give you all the glory for it in Jesus' name. Amen.